This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, episode 15. I'm Steve at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys Network from idpguys.org. So, welcome back, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So, today we're going to be continuing our fan base series. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the show. Hope you enjoy. And if you do enjoy it, please subscribe and keep on watching. But if you're listening once again, you know the drill at this point. We're going through as many teams as we can before the start of the season. And I'm bringing you some of my favorites from the fantasy football community to talk about their favorite teams. Because I might not be as plugged into these teams as much as my guests are. My favorite team, of course, is the Philadelphia Eagles. So today is an extra special, maybe a little extra spicy show as we're covering the Dallas Cowboys with two guests, two of my favorite people in the fantasy football community. We're going to bring them on right now. First, we have Bruce at Coach Bruce 122. He is a content creator at Yards Per Fantasy, and he's a ranker at Fantasy Pros. Bruce, how you doing? And how long have you been a Cowboys fan?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited. We talk all the time on Twitter. It's nice to put a face with a logo, right?
That's
Uh,
right. Yep.
so I've been a Cowboys fan, believe it or not, since I'll say April Fool's of 1974. So, which is the day I was born. So I
Oh,
just figured I
perfect.
plug in a little April Fool's Day there. So my dad, I was born and raised in Arizona. As everybody knows, we didn't get the Cardinals until 1988. I was born in '74, so I was basically a free agent when it came to rooting for teams. But he went to high school with Bob Brunig, who went on to play at Alhambra High School here in Phoenix, who then went on to play at ASU and then got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys and was second all time in the team in tackles before you having to retire after 10 years. So growing up,
Wow.
I was a Cowboys fan just from the day I was born because of the relationship my dad had with Bob Brunig. And of course, he wasn't drafted until '75, but I didn't really understand what I was watching until I was about 6 or 7 anyway. So
Oh,
it
of
worked
course.
out.
Of
But
course.
so I mean that's going way back in the days of Danny White and Tony Dorsett and Ed Too Tall Jones and all those guys. So been a long time, man. Back in the heyday, I'll say.
Well, that's great. So you'll be able to add a lot of nice perspective to the current state of the team and
Yeah,
everything else, and provide a lot of wisdom as far as that's concerned too. So, well, you're great. I appreciate you coming on. All right,
looking forward to it.
excellent. And we have Ralph at Lobos FF Den. He is a writer for DynastyProsFootball.com, along with me, and also a writer at Face Off Sports Network. So, Ralph, how you doing? And how long have you been a Cowboys fan?
I am great, Steve. Thanks for having me on today, man. I've it's to your point, it's been a long time overdue. I think we've been on cast together, but the second you said you were starting this puppy up, I was thrilled and anxiously waiting to come on. So I really do appreciate you. I very similar to Coach. My baby picture, and I kid you not, it's in a Cowboys helmet. So unfortunately, being brought into it, not having a say or a decision in this, has absolutely been bittersweet to say the least. But my dad is a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan. I have been a Dallas Cowboys fan since day one. So obviously, I was born in '93. So I haven't gotten to experience the glory days. All I've gotten to experience is heartache and Tony dropping the ball. I love Tony. I love Tony, but him dropping the ball, playoffs not being very successful. I mean, shoot, my heart still hurts from 4 or 5 months ago. So we
Yeah,
will
Two
get into
yeah.
that.
two things I took from that intro, Ralph. One, the
Heartbreak.
helmet you had on back
Heartbreak.
then probably still fits. And two, I'm old enough to be your dad. So, there's those are important facts I think for the audience.
But no, yeah, it's interesting. Like bringing fans on, it's like their fandom can be very optimistic or it could be very pessimistic or just very realistic, right? My perception of the Cowboys is like just because they hadn't gone to a certain level of the playoffs, they were very good teams, very exciting teams. So it's like you get close or you get right there, and it's just kind of dumb luck sometimes, and just it's just one of those things. But it is an interesting perspective that you bring, because like I don't know, I just was never going into a Cowboys game as an Eagles fan like happy. I just was always anxious, always nervous,
Yeah.
So it's just I guess that's just how like the rivalries work, right? But yeah, it's just very fascinating to me. But you guys have been just very good friends to this point and very great support. So this is awesome that we can finally get together and talk about our your favorite team. Yeah. So we're
Oh,
gonna
I thought
start
it
with
was
the
yours too. Is that your favorite team?
no way, Jose. Yeah, no. Yeah, it couldn't be further from that. From the truth there.
There you
Like
go.
I love you guys, but you share one common flaw, and that is you are Cowboys fans. But
Fair
for
enough.
Not
tonight,
by choice, Steve. Not
by
by choice.
choice. That's right. Well, you haven't chosen to change either, so it's one of those things. However, we're going to start with a summary of the 2021 season and work our way up through the off season and then looking ahead to the 2022 season. So last season, the Cowboys finished with a 12-5 record, first in the NFC East, first division title since the 2018 season, but unfortunately lost to the San Francisco 49ers in the wild card round of the playoffs in that legitimately wild finish, which you were alluding to a moment ago, Lobo, which we really don't need to get into too much. But ultimately, I was glad to see Dak Prescott back just as a pure football fan, glad to see him back in full health again and see the Cowboys defensive unit improve to the degree that it did with the help of 2021 first round pick linebacker Micah Parsons doing his thing. So, fellas, what is your level of anticipation like for this season? Is it same old, or is it a little higher due to the disappointing playoff departure?
Coach, you take it, brother. I'll
Yeah,
follow
you want
up.
me to go first? So
Yeah,
I'll
go
try
for
to
it.
keep this long-winded story short. Uh, we'll skip what happened in the playoffs.
Fair
We'll
enough.
skip right over that. We could probably do that for the last 27 years now. But I think for me, there's the frustration of how the season ended. Right, like here we go again. Dallas makes the playoffs. You finally win the division again, and then you do what you do in the first round of the playoffs. But I think for me this year, just looking at where we're at is offensively, Dak Prescott's got to take the next step. Right now, it's hey, he's arrived. He recovered from the compound fracture. He had a heck of a season last year with 37 touchdowns, a 68% completion percentage. But now it's like, hey, until you lead this team into the playoffs and make a deep run, there's going to continue to be the naysayers, and there's going to be continue to be, who's the better quarterback? Is he an elite quarterback? So I think that's one thing I'm really looking forward to seeing Dak do this upcoming season because he's no doubt the unquestioned leader of this football team, both on and off the field. But I think it all starts with a couple things that you look at and you say, hey, what's going to happen with the wide receiver room, right? Is CeeDee Lamb going to be an elite wide receiver? You see that debate all the time on Twitter. Can he be that guy in an offense that notoriously since Kellen Moore has been there spreads the ball around? That's the thing. No matter what you do defensively, we try to make you wrong, and they don't target one receiver. So that's interesting. Michael Gallup probably not going to be at the beginning of the year, and now you've also got Jalen Tolbert and you've got James Washington now competing for that wide receiver 3 spot. And when is Michael Gallup going to be back? And then we're going to get into that a little bit later. And then the running back room, Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott. Where are we at with target share there, with the rushing share, in that situation? And does Tony Pollard continue for the 4th year now? If he does it, continue to see more volume both in the run and the passing game. So there's a lot of factors that have to come into play that we're looking to play out through minicamp, through the preseason, and of course into the regular season. That's got me super excited. Then I think the offensive line, I think, is a third piece of that. That Tyler Smith, who they got in the first round, I think is a plug and play guy that will eventually be Tyrone Smith's backup, but he gets to plug in. He's an absolute mauler in the run game. I see the Cowboys definitely being a team that focuses a little bit more on the run game early in the season as Gallup's getting back, and they're trying to build trust up with that receiving core with Dak Prescott. So a lot of things to be excited about, but a lot of question marks as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How about you, Lobo? High anticipation, or
It's
where are we at?
I will say the anticipation is there as far as it's hard not to be excited after a 12-5 season, right? And,
Yep.
and I think it's even harder to look at. I know we're going to talk about some of the departures and additions here in a little bit. So I think it's hard to look at this roster and look at last year's roster and be as excited and anticipate just as much success. And I think that's where I kind of calm my expectations a little bit. I think the bigger thing, it's not just the Cowboys roster, it's the Philadelphia Eagles were able to
Yeah.
ramp up their squad quite a bit. The Giants, they went out and got a new coach. They went out, and I believe the Giants are a better team this year than they were last year,
Yeah.
100%. So I think it's that weird feeling of knowing that I don't believe the Cowboys have the team that they had last year. And I think, to Coach's point, it might take a little bit for them to figure it out. I think some of the rookies that they added will make an impact, maybe not immediately, and they have a tough start to the season.
Yeah.
I mean, first 2 games of the season, they open up with Tampa again and then go straight to Cincinnati. So, I mean, I think
on the road for 2. Yeah.
On the road for 2. So, I mean, I think what that means is, yes, rookies are going to be figuring it out. And I think more importantly, those first 2 games, Dak is throwing the ball at least 80 times. So they're going to need to figure it out quick within the first 2 games of the season. If not, they're starting off 0-2. And that's not an easy thing to come back from. So anticipation is anxiously and optimistically cautious, but
pessimistically optimistic. Does that make sense? Does that sound like every offseason for a Cowboys fan, right?
100%. It sounds like every season past the regular season for the Cowboys.
Yeah, but, absolutely.
I think, yes, we'll get into some of those additions and why I'm a little concerned. And I think, like I said, more importantly, it's hats off to your Eagles, Steve, because they were able to have a hell of an offseason. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting just from like a fan's perspective, growing up in the Philadelphia area as a Philadelphia fan. I just have learned over the years just to have neutral expectations. Whenever the expectations are high and there's disappointment, it's a nasty crash. And then when the expectations are more neutral, then it's like a pleasant surprise. Like last year, I had fairly low expectations. I was not happy with the Nick Sirianni hire as head coach. So I just was really excited to see what Jalen Hurts was going to be able to do. Maybe he'll be the franchise quarterback of the future, maybe not. And then they ended up making the playoffs. I was like, well, this is great. Like, this is cool, And then they, of course, embarrassed themselves on national TV, losing to Tampa Bay. But either way, it's just a much better, I would think, a healthier place to be. Like, just kind of go in neutral, just understand, you want to see your team win, but just to have the high expectations with all these roster moves that we've made, it's hard to not be excited. But of course, about 10 years ago, they added all these free agents. They had the dream team of the preseason, and all this, and they just really was one of the most awful Eagles seasons of like recent memory as a fan. So, it's nice on paper, but you got to see it happen on the field too. So, but no, I would agree. I am cautiously optimistic for my Eagles as well. But again,
was that the year, Steve, that you guys got Nadi
Asamoah, Rogers Cromartie, Vince Young came in as like a backup quarterback, but it was like, so it was a lot of players, but like Asamoah was like the big one. And boy, I mean, just maybe he just was coached a bit differently in Oakland at the time it was Oakland from what he was with us. But boy, I mean, horrendous stuff.
I just remember my boy Dez, and one of my favorite all-time Dallas Cowboys players. So Dez, if you hear this, man, you are one of my favorite players. But I just remember Dez torching him both times that they played it, and it was a rough time for Asamoah. But Dez made everyone look like peasants. So.
Well, he absolutely did. And, I just think of Des Bryant. I just start to shudder because him and Romo just destroyed us, especially in Philadelphia. It was like they just came to Philadelphia on a mission to make Eagles fans cry, and they succeeded. At least that's my memory. So, but yeah, crazy. But yeah, I appreciate both of your perspectives. There's a little bit of cautious optimism, and you are realistic about the changes that have gone on through the team. I do, we'll get into the free agency additions and losses here, but one thing that I think is unbelievably critical for the team is that they were able to retain the defensive coordinator Dan Quinn and the offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. I think they very easily could have been head coach candidates, and they stayed. It's kind of like the Patriots have kept Josh McDaniels for years, and now he's got a gig. So they are on that path to getting head coaching jobs. So I think it's really good foundation for the team as a whole to retain them. But now we'll get into the players that they unfortunately were not able to retain, and the players that they brought in. So to me, some of the key losses include wide receivers Amari Cooper and then Cedric Wilson, who finally was able to have a decent season for them. Happy to see that. Unfortunately, no longer with the team. Left tackle Lyle Collins, or just a tackle, Lyle Collins, defensive backs Keanu Neal and DeMonte Casey, outside linebacker Randy Gregory, center Connor Williams, and the kicker Greg Zerline. We don't get a lot of kicker news here on this show, so that's at least a fun mention. Then they did bring in wide receiver James Washington, and then linebacker edge rusher Dante Fowler, who has been a little bit up and down in his career, but still a high draft capital guy. Obviously was a very good prospect. So you get a talented player under the supervision of Dan Quinn. And I think like not much to lose there, right? But I do
Who
think,
was drafted by Dan Quinn.
oh,
That's
well, there
right.
you go.
Yeah,
There you
that's right.
go. Perfect. Yeah, so that was a nice one there. Yeah, so that's why I bring you guys on, because I overlook some of these little details, you know? So I think that's great. Now, was I missing anything of importance on who left the team and who was brought in, or is that pretty much what you guys think the most notable differences there?
No, I think those are certainly the most notable. I mean, you can
Gotcha.
kind of go down the list, and obviously Amari Cooper, I think, is a situation where they knew if we could move from Amari Cooper and get out of the contract, we
Yeah.
can re-sign Michael Gallup, and then we have receivers that we can target in the draft. The plan worked out well. So I think there's there from a concern standpoint. Amari Cooper was also, guys, as much as I loved Amari Cooper. He was also a guy that you saw come out of games in critical situations and take himself out. And he was a guy that didn't always show up, especially on the road against really good teams. And so there's a part of you that says, hey, I want to see if Dak can take the next step and say, hey, because he really resurrected Amari Cooper's career. He was coming off what was happening with the Raiders at the time and came over to Dallas and made an immediate impact.
Mhm.
But I'm kind of looking forward to seeing Dak become a more complete, more efficient, if that's possible, this upcoming season with CD Lamb now, who's really getting his first year in a full camp with Dak. Because you had
Correct.
COVID, and then you had Dak, who had the shoulder injury coming off the compound
Mm,
fracture going into last season. So it's really the first full off season for CD Lamb and Dak Prescott. And then in Kellen Moore, I think it's so important when you can have the fourth year in a row in the same offensive system with the same offensive coordinator. A lot of your key pieces are still in place.
Yep.
So there's a lot to be excited for, but I do think the Amari Cooper's a big one. I think for a lot of Cowboy fans that they struggled with early on, that maybe didn't have a deeper understanding of the game of football. And then Lyle Collins, I think at right tackle, even though there were some issues there, that's a big miss because there was a big
Mhm.
drop off between Lyle Collins and Terrence Steele. We unfortunately got to see what Terrence Steele was about when he got a lot of reps. I think his overall PFF grade was around 64 versus Lyle Collins, who was in the mid 80s and was really good in the run game. So, which is what Dallas likes to do, which sets up a lot of what they do in the play action game. So I think
Mhm.
those for me are the two biggest losses that we had. I think Keanu Neal and DeMonte Kazi were great role players, but those are guys who can be replaced. Randy Gregory, liked him. There was a lot of stuff going on off the field too, and I think
Mhm.
him taking a step away after Dallas showed support for him as he was going through all of that was a little bit frustrating as a fan too. But I'm okay moving on. And Connor Williams, 15 penalties. It seems like every time the Cowboys had a big play, it was a holding penalty on Connor Williams, and we were coming back to third and
Mhm.
38. So there are some guys I'm not sad to see go. Greg Zerline, great kicker when he was with the Rams, comes over to us. He's 5 for 14 on
Peace.
field goals of 50 or more. That's where you make your money
Peace.
in the NFL. I mean, those are difference between wins and losses, and really big important possessions. So those are guys that I don't miss a whole lot. And I'm super excited for Dante Fowler. I'm excited for James Washington coming in his fifth year. There's a veteran guy that gets to come in and help Jalen Tolbert about how to be a professional. I don't expect him to make a huge splash in Dallas, but I expect him to be involved early on until Michael Gallup returns. So as far as people they lost, I mean, yeah, I think those are the big ones: is Amari Cooper, Lyle Collins, and as far as who we gained, Dante Fowler. Let's hope he can regain, 2019 11 and a half sack Dante Fowler. And if we can get that guy, then I'm going to be okay with it.
I
gotcha,
would
gotcha.
I would agree with you there, Coach. I think if Fowler can be half that player,
Yeah.
that's all we really need. I mean, just with a healthy Tank Lawrence on that corner,
Yep.
along with Fowler, We see Micah Parsons, who I truly believe will be the defensive player of the year this year. There's a lot of elements to his game. So I think, and obviously all that is in thanks to Dan Quinn. And so
Yeah.
I think when we see that defense really come into play, I thought they did a very, very good job. And by they, I truly mean Dan Quinn, because I mean, being a Cowboys fan, Coach, you know what it's like every single year. Our offense is great. Our offense is good. Our offense can put up the points. We were top 5, what is it, 3-4 years in a row now?
Yeah.
That's great. But it doesn't matter if we have a bottom 5 defense. It's down to crunch time. Defense wins championships. And Dallas, I mean, even in the Romo days, they never had. I actually read a fun fact the other day that Tony Romo never had a top 5 defense ever
No.
in his
Wow.
career. So, I mean, what does that do, obviously, to him? It puts more of the pressure on him, and it puts the pressure on the quarterback. It puts the pressure on Dak. You've got to put up 30 points because your defense ain't stopping anybody. So I think that's a huge point. I think some of the defensive people that left, to your point, Randy Gregory, it is what it is. He was good one game, non-existent the next. The consistency wasn't there. And I would say that was very similar with Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper one game would go out and ball out and have a great, and then he'd have a great showing. And the next time, he kind of just looked like he was just on the field because he had to be, or he was on the field because he wasn't really making the effort. And I think that was a telltale sign last year when they were facing off, and this was week 1 when CeeDee Lamb had that huge game week 1, and Cooper just kind of was like just there on the field, and it was week 1, and I just remember thinking to myself, man, I hope it's not like that all season. And so, I mean, I think for Cooper to be going, great. Best of luck to him in Cleveland. Whoever's throwing him the ball there. But I think I'm excited about Tolbert. And to your point, I like James Washington. I think he'll be a good veteran presence. I don't know if he'll make an impact on the field as much as off the field in as far as mentoring goes. But yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like the step they're taking. I feel like for once, it seems like every offseason there's, speculation about somebody getting in a barroom brawl. There's speculation about, PEDs, or speculation about, things that are happening off the field. And I feel like this offseason, we're coming into a situation in a mini camp where we're not having those issues. Now, we did have the Jerry Jones incident. I get it. But I'm talking about players on the field. And I feel like they're doing a good job of bringing in some veteran leadership, guys that are good both on and off the field. And so I like the culture that Mike McCarthy's building, as much heat as he takes sometimes. I feel like they're building this roster in some ways the right way, although you're hoping it's addition by subtraction, because I still feel like, to Lobo's point earlier, we're not as good of a football team on roster wise, especially offensively, as we were last year.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, obviously, free agency is just one way to build a team. Of course, then comes the NFL draft. And what I think they did very well in this draft overall was they just were able to fill in a lot of those pieces that they did not retain. I don't know if lose is the right word, but they just did not retain some talent, and they were able to plug in a lot of those positions. So in the first round, 24th, they selected a tackle, Tyler Smith, as Coach mentioned earlier. Round 2, edge rusher Sam Williams. Round 3, wide receiver Jalen Tolbert, who we'll talk about in just a bit here. Round 4, tight end Jake Ferguson. Round 5 and 6, they took a tackle, a cornerback, 2 linebackers, and a defensive tackle. I think that whole handful of fifths in there. So, fellas, what do you think about the draft class? Was there a favorite or a least favorite pick? And then were there any players you would have preferred at either the positions they targeted or entirely different positions altogether? And if so, what would you have preferred? For example, at 24th overall, Tyler Lindenbaum was available. So that was my
knew we were going to start with
thinking
that
there.
one. Yeah,
because
absolutely, I was starting there. But yeah,
perfect. Yeah, go for it. You run with it. Yeah.
Go ahead, Lobo.
No, man, this is the only one I'll take, Coach, and then you can go after. I was just so passionate about Tyler Lindenbaum.
Yeah.
I think you and I texted right before the draft and said, who are some of the guys we need? I had texted. I had tweeted, something around what Dallas ideally would do in this draft. I had them taking Tyler. I wasn't sure he would fall that low, and I swear when he was on the board, I thought that was the pick. And obviously we skip on him. He goes the next pick, I believe, to Baltimore.
The Ravens traded up.
Yeah,
Ravens trade up to get him, and he, we've been missing that centerpiece since Travis Frederick retired. I mean, that centerpiece, he was one of the best centers in the league. He retires, he leaves, and that leaves a huge hole in that offense. Obviously, Zach Martin, if not the best, one of the best linemen in the league,
Yeah.
along with Tyron Smith. And then you have Frederick. I thought Lindenbaum was a no-brainer. And I was shocked to see Tyler Smith. I think, every year I try and do as much rookie deep dives and analysis as I can. I usually try and get to the third, fourth round talent, and just that's a lot of pieces and that's a lot of guys to look at. And I think with a lot of experts, and I kind of agreed with them, they had him almost at like a round 3 talent. So I definitely thought it was a bit of a reach for the Cowboys to grab Tyler Smith there. To Coach's point, I think what he does excel in is in the rush game. And I think that's where they are really trying to establish that presence again. So, he's young. I believe he's 20 years old, Coach? 19, 20?
21. Yeah.
21. Okay. So, I mean,
just
he's
turned
21 years
21.
old. Yeah, just turned 21. He's a young guy. When we drafted Tyron Smith, he was a 19-year-old kid. So it kind of reminded me of Tyler Smith, in that young step, being able to learn from Tyron Smith and Zach Martin will be good. But yeah, I think that first one, I wasn't very happy about it the day of. So yeah, Coach, what are your thoughts?
Well, so here's what's interesting. Just to talk about Tyler Smith real quick, because I was like Lobo going into the draft where what do we need? We need interior offensive line, and I feel like we need interior defensive line. And then for Randy Gregory, do we need another pass rusher?
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of on. I think everybody was. I think there was some talk about the sexy pick being if you could get one of the top wide receivers. I'm like, no, let's not do that, right? So I felt like with Tyler Smith at first, you also had Jermaine Johnson on the board as a defensive end, who I thought would be a great pick. Tyler Linderbaum, I was high on as well. I think it would have been great because I do go back to Travis Frederick. And when the Dallas Cowboys are really, really good at what they do, and they could just pound you 4.5, 5 yards per carry with Zach Martin and Travis Frederick and Tyron Smith, and it didn't matter who they put at right tackle and who they put at left guard.
Yep.
It really didn't matter. And so I felt like with Tyler Smith, but then I purchased a Caddy's cut up deal, so I was able to watch a lot of film on Tyler Smith and after the pick, because I didn't expect us to go there either. And I was impressed. I mean, the guy's extremely strong. He's a young kid. He's violent at the punch. He's very, very good. He's got good feet. He's got good lateral movement. He's a guy that naturally should be playing probably in 2 to 3 years when Tyron Smith is done. Will probably convert to a left tackle. I think that's the game plan. But you can quicken that learning curve by putting him inside next to, at the left guard position where he's playing next to left guard position. He's playing next to a Tyron Smith. We're talking about a great guy to learn from. So I like what they're doing interior line. Tyler Biotish is going to have to show some improvement in the center position, which I think is why the Linderbaum, situation made so much sense for us. But I am excited now. The more I've read into Tyler, and I'm going to buy the hype that he's a guy that's going to be a plug and play. He's going to dominate. Look, he was a 94, one of the highest graded against the run. And so that's exciting for me because I think that's where our offense starts. So,
Yeah.
But I'll go to the next step too. I think, and the other one that I was really, and it was Jermaine Johnson. Like I said, was another guy that I was really hoping we would get. And then the fifth pick, and our fifth round pick in Damian Clark. He had a transfusion surgery. He had some neck issues, but if you watch, he was a 2021 Dick Butkus Award finalist as the best linebacker in the country. Of course, went to Nakobe Dean, which your Eagles. I was hoping he was going to drop to us. You guys decided to take him a few picks before us. Way to go, Philadelphia! Not the first time that's happened, but that's another guy. If you talk about a dark horse, I think the fifth round pick for Damon Clark, coming out of I'm super excited about. So that's another one that I think is worth at least discussing a little bit and saying, hey, there's an opportunity there for him to make the roster and be a guy that, 2 years down the road, he can't play this year because of the surgery. So you're looking at 2023, but I'm excited to see what he can do for this team, in a couple of years.
It kind of reminds me of Cox.
Jabril Cox.
Defense. Jabril Cox. Yeah. Last year we didn't get to see a lot of him at all just because of that injury that he had at LSU his senior year. But he is one that I truly expect to take that next step. And obviously with Keanu Neal out, that gives him the opportunity to kind of step in and be that guy. So I'm super excited to see him.
Gotcha. So how about Jalen Tolbert? Yeah. It was really fascinating to me. Day two wide receivers. Uh, it seemed like the second round was just like filled with a lot of these guys, and it seemed like Dallas got a really good selection where they got him. You know, like the Patriots get Tyquan Thornton, and the Packers get Christian Watts. It was just like littered with like I think there's like 7 wide receivers in that second round. So tell me about Jalen. Are you guys excited for him? Do you think he steps in right away as a rookie and makes an impact? What do you guys think?
You want me to
Coach, you
take
want to
that
start
one?
off?
Or? Yeah,
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
can.
Yeah.
So a little dad joke here. I'll start with on this one. So, what do Jalen Tolbert, Michael Irvin, Des Bryant, Drew Pearson, and CeeDee Lamb all have in common?
I
The
don't know.
number 88.
Oh, okay.
Jalen Tolbert was the 88th pick in the draft. Right.
Oh, there
So a
we go.
little fun fact there for you. I think a lot of in this wide receiver class, it wasn't a really deep class. You didn't have the Justin Jeffersons, you don't have the Jamar Chases, but you do have some guys that can play a role and be some difference makers. In 2 to 3 years down the road. But I felt like with Jalen Tolbert, he's from South Alabama. Okay, so
Mhm.
right there you have where he played. That's going to be a knock. Draft capital. A lot of people in the fantasy space are going to say that's a knock, right? But the reality is, he finished his career with 178 grabs. I was like over 3,000 yards and 20 plus touchdowns. But I think what was neat and how Dallas can utilize him is that field stretcher.
Mhm.
He led the nation in targets, catches, and receiving yards on plays of 20 yards or more,
Yep.
which
Wow.
is right.
Yep.
So when you look at that, you go back and you watch the film, and the kid has to work on. He doesn't have a full toolbox of release moves. He's not doesn't really comfortable against man press, but there's things on film that I also liked what he does in space, his
Mhm.
ability to stretch the field. With Michael Gallup missing some time, he's going to have an opportunity, especially in Dallas where they run a lot of 11 personnel, to be that third wide receiver. And again, between him and James Washington, but I think Tolbert gives you a little bit more quickness. I think he's a little more over the top for what they want to do schematically. So I'm excited to see what Jalen Tolbert does. And as much as I think that a lot of people wanted the Cowboys maybe to go and continue to build that defense up or continue to look at maybe another position, I felt like it was the right move. And he was the best player available at the time in the draft. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do this year. I think it's 2020. Now, I will say on my projections for Project 32, I just want to share that with you guys real quick. I've got him at a 13% target share, which I know a lot of people are going to say that
Okay.
seems high for a rookie quarterback, but you got to take the scheme that the Dallas Cowboys use and the offensive system that he's in that gives him close to 80 targets, 55 receptions for 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. His
I can
over
see that.
under, yeah, his over under with Josh Larkey and Ray GQ, they did their deal on FTN and they were talking about over unders for all the wide receivers in this rookie class. And I think for Jalen Tolbert, it was like 598. And they both took the over.
I'm
But
smashing that over.
yeah, Ray GQ was also, if I remember correctly, I think he was the one that was kind of like, man, I don't know. It depends on when does Michael Gallup start playing? What does that offense look like this year? But I think what they're going to be able to do with the improvement of the offensive line, especially on the interior part of it, you're going to be able to have a little bit more play action. And what people don't understand about the Cowboys offense is they were middle of the pack in RPO plays, motion, pre-snap motion plays, play action. But what they did really, really well was all three of them. They didn't run the most plays in those situations, but they were in
Mhm.
the top 10 in the league in all three of those scenarios because they're really good at spreading the field. And Dak again does not key in on typically one receiver, and he looks at what the defense is doing. I think there's going to be some room to operate for Jalen Tolbert and for Dalton Schultz in this offense this year, especially in the first couple of weeks against Cincinnati and where you're going to have to throw the ball 40 plus times. We're going to get to see real
Yeah,
quickly what this kid can do.
absolutely. +1 to everything you just said, Coach. And I think that's what's going to kind of throw Tolbert into the fire is those first 2 weeks of the season. And I think we see the progression that rookie wide receivers in particular over the last few years, they've taken that big step from day one. I think
Yeah.
rookie quarterbacks, you start seeing some of those, hey, let's hold off a year. Let's hold off, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. Let's step back 1 year. I mean, Mahomes, a bunch of guys, let them sit, let them observe, let them learn. Wide receivers are thrown to the fire from day one. And I think Tolbert will be thrown into the fire against two teams where they will need him to step up. And I think that's going to be we're going to see what that kid's about in the first 2 weeks of the season. So whether he puts up which I believe he will put up. I mean, right around your projections, Coach, sounds right. I was guessing around 660 to 680 for Tolbert, so I think realistically that's where he can be, and I'm excited to see him. And we have to take a look at, to your point, Gallup. Even if he does come back, as some of the reports are saying, I think they're hoping, or they're being optimistic that he'll be back by week 3, week 4.
Yeah, that's what I'm
He's
hearing.
not going to be back 100%. He's not coming back, and he's not going to have that 80% snap percentage that he usually does. That's just not going to be what he's about. He may start off slow. Maybe week 4, week 5, we're looking at a 30 or 40% snap count percentage. Then we see that jump up to 50, 60%. By week 5, week 6, if Tolbert's in the groove of things, Kellen Moore is going to find a way to get him the ball. And I think that's also what's going to make that year for him. So I'm super excited about the kid. To Coach's point, had a monster senior year at South Alabama, 1,400 yards, 8 touchdowns. I mean, the kid can ball. And I think what people forget about Tolbert is he's a big guy. He's 6'3". So I mean, to have that physicality at 6'3" is a nice combo with CeeDee Lamb, who's 6'2". I believe Gallup, if I'm not mistaken, is also 6'2". I will have to take a look at exactly how tall he is, but I mean, I think Dallas now has a solid receiving core, and obviously excited to see what they can do with that. But I'm super excited for Tolbert, even as a wide receiver 3 when Gallup comes back. I think he'll make an impact, so I'm excited for him.
Yeah, it's interesting. So obviously, dynasty players are well aware of his name, right? But then you get like a lot of the people who just come back every year for like the redraft side of
Yeah.
things, and they're always are looking for these sleepers, like the end of their bench or late in drafts. I think he would be a fantastic addition because with a player like him, you're looking for opportunity and situation, and he absolutely has it early in the season, and he's got, in my opinion, one of the best situations being part of the Dallas offense, and like with the slow start that Gallup could have, like you alluded to. I mean, if we're being realistic, I don't know if James Washington is really going to be a major threat, to his chances at getting targets. I think James Washington is a solid professional player,
Yeah.
but I
Mhm.
think
He's a
that
depth piece.
absolutely, yeah. So I'm very excited for Tolbert. Oh my gosh, I keep saying it wrong. Every episode, like the last couple episodes, I've been having this little bit about having like a jar. It's not a swear jar. It's a every time I say a player's name wrong, I add a quarter in. So
Yeah, there
I'm
you go.
like making myself really poor with this guy's name. But either way, just gonna keep throwing the coins in the jar. Anyway, I looked on Player Profiler earlier today, and the player comp for all things considered for him on there was Adam Thielen. So
Yeah.
if you can have like an Adam
Good call.
Thielen into that offense, woo, that to me that's very exciting. And
If
again,
he's 75% Adam Thielen, I'll take that all day long.
100%.
absolutely,
And I just looked up how
absolutely,
tall Gallup is. Gallup is 6'1".
Yeah, he's 6'1".
So 6'1", CeeDee Lamb is 6'2", Tolbert is 6'3". We're looking at those pieces, just fits in just right. And I think the last thing also to say on Tolbert is Dak, when healthy, his last 2 seasons is going for exactly 596 pass attempts.
Yeah.
Coach, I'd love to know what your projections are for Dak this year. I have him right around 580 because I do anticipate that they run the ball a little bit more this year, but also, I mean, again, those first 2 weeks of season is going to lead into kind of just, if we start 0-2, the urgency is going to be there, and we're going to try and get that offense going more and more. So I have him around 580, but I mean, you're looking at Amari Cooper gone, Cedric Wilson is gone, and Gallup being injured for the first couple weeks. That's going to free up right around 230, 240 targets for someone to take. Now, obviously, Tolbert, not going to be all of them, but I do anticipate some of those numbers going to him. So I'm excited. Coach, what do
Believe
you
it or not, I've actually got Dak at 630 attempts
boom.
this year.
Boom.
So you've got to look at he missed a game last year. I think Cooper Rush started that game against Minnesota and won that game,
That's
if I remember
right.
correctly. But he
Yep.
last year they had 1,120 plays, which I've got him at 1,105, so a little bit less. And then I've also got him at, they had 647 pass attempts last year. So that's 16 games with Dak, and plus the Cooper Rush game, you're at 630. So I think ballpark wise, you're there. I think schematically, the same offensive coordinator, a lot of the same pieces in place. So
Mm-hmm.
to say that you project this offense to be similar, the only thing it could change is negative game script. But even in negative game script, they threw the ball 59% of the time. So you are looking at an offense. I've got him at 57%. To be honest with you, I did the projections. When I did them at 59, his numbers were too high. I was like, I got to calm it down a little bit. I got to bring it to 57 just to make the numbers make sense. But he's around 40. I've got him at 4,700 yards. Could be a little bit high, but that's with his yards per attempt actually down a little bit. And then I've got him at 37 touchdowns, and I do have him running the ball a little bit more just based on what we're hearing. And as we get into mini camps, it seems like they're going to use him a little bit more in the run game. And he's come out and said, hey, if the play breaks down, you're going to see the old Dak come back and get the first down and maybe be used in the red zone inside the 5 as well. So I'm excited for Dak's season for sure.
Yep.
Awesome. So we're going to look ahead now to this current season in terms of what we think the expectations are in matters of just pure wins and losses and what the potential postseason availability could look like. So after reviewing the schedule, what do you think are realistic expectations for a record at the end of the season? Last year, they obviously went 12-5. Do you think that's repeatable, or where are you guys at with that?
I'm going to say,
Yeah,
I'll
go
take
for it.
Coach, because I'd love to hear what you have to say on this.
Yeah.
But I think even if it was a bad year, I could see a 10-7 record for him. Based on having to go against Washington twice a year and the Giants twice a year. Those 4 games alone, I think that kind of just excels us a little bit. I will say, I mean, obviously when schedule came out, we have some tough matchups. Obviously, first 2 weeks, as we've mentioned throughout the whole show, is going to be tough. But afterwards, it does get a little easier. So I think you start looking at some of those pieces. I think a 10-7 is realistic. If we're able to progress when Michael Gallup comes back, Tyler Smith as a rookie starts to make an impact, we start to see some of these pieces get put together. I can absolutely see an 11-6 season. I don't know about a 12-5 again. I think that's going to be tough, but I could totally see a 10-7, 11-6.
Yeah, so I've got him at 11-6, and I think that's being, ceiling. I've got 12-5 floor, and again, I always assume everybody's healthy. Like I don't think anybody. I'm not in the game of injury prone and trying to predict how many games somebody's going to miss. So everything. That's why Dak's projections might seem a little high. Is everything's based on a 17 game schedule, and then we factor it down from there. But I break the schedule down. I mean, I know Sharp Football has them at the 10th easiest schedule in the NFL.
Yep.
Surprising when you look at their start. Right. You got Tampa Bay and Cincinnati on the road, but they've got 9 home games. So every year with 17 games now, you're going to have 9 home or 9 away. They've got 9 home. So that's a little bit of an advantage there. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we talked about Tampa Bay, Cincinnati. I've got them going. And then start choosing against Tampa Bay, Cincinnati. And then they have a home game against the Rams. So in those 3 games, right, I've got them going 1-2. I think they steal one of those 3. And it's probably going to be the Cincinnati game. Right.
I can
in
see
week
that.
2. I see that being the one, because I think Cincinnati offensive line wise brought in 3 new pieces. I think there's a lot of things I got to work out still there. Giants and Commanders twice. I'm never going to get used to saying Commanders, right?
Never.
I want to say Redskins, but it is what it is. Or the WTFs, whatever we want to call them. But I think those 2 teams have improved. We know Dallas went 6-0 within the division last year. I think they sweep the Giants and the Commanders again this year. I still think those teams are some players away. AFC South and the NFC North are the 2 divisions they're playing that are off script. So you've got the Titans away, the Colts at home, the Texans at home, and the Jaguars away. I've got them going 3-1 in those 4 games. And then against the NFC North, you have the Packers away and the Vikings away, of course, because they're not going to give us the Bears and Lions at home, or away. That's how they're going to do it. But I do have us going 3-1 there. We just have the Vikings number. I think the Packers are a team that's where that loss is probably going to come from. Defensively, what the Packers are doing, it's an elite defense over there. That's going to be a struggle in Lambeau. But I do see us going 3-1 there. And then Philadelphia, I got to splitting it. I don't think we're sweeping the division again. I think it's a home and away series, and I think both home teams win this year. I think that competition between those 2 teams is that good. It doesn't matter if the Cowboys are projected to go 4-12 and the Eagles are projected to go 12-4. Those 2 teams, when they play, and you can say that about the whole NFC East, but it just seems like over the last 10 years, it's an absolute dogfight. So I think as long as everybody stays healthy, 11-6 is right on the money.
Yeah, I like that. You guys are right there together. You know what I mean? I guess like the only question is like, is that good enough to win the division? I would tend to say that it probably is. But it's very interesting. I know you guys are probably aware of this fact, but maybe not everyone who's listening in now is aware of this fact. But the
Oh, we
NFC
know.
East,
I'm
yeah, the
sure.
NFC East is
Yeah.
such a bizarre division. No team has repeated as division champ
Yep.
since the Eagles did it from the years of 2001 through 2004.
Yep.
Now, I think it is very possible that the Dallas Cowboys can repeat. I am just skeptical of my Eagles. You know what I mean? So I would think that the Cowboys are probably, just in my mind, still probably favored to win the division. But I think at worst that the Cowboys do get a wild card spot. So I think your expectations are right on track. I think that they should be high. But it is such a bizarre division, and even the Eagles just for whatever reason just tend to like play down to Washington sometimes. They tend to play down to the Giants sometimes, and it's never. Well, I mean, I don't want to say never, but like some of those games are just like you said, absolute dogfights. You know what I mean? It's really
100%.
Yeah.
it's a really wild division to be a part of. But yeah, so I'm very curious to see what gives there and if that streak can stay alive or if it can be broken if Dallas holds on. But yeah, so I'm very much anticipating just the football season in general, right? You know, but
Yeah.
I am just objectively as a football fan, just excited to see what the Dallas defense is able to do to try to balance out their efforts, you know,
Yeah.
overall. So at the end of the day, this show is supposed to be a fantasy football show. I do enjoy just the general football talk. So now we're going to get into the real good stuff here. And now you guys can go at whatever angle, dynasty, redraft, or both. You can take your selections either way you want. But we're going to talk about on the Cowboys offensive side of the ball, which players to target at projected cost, and then which players to fade at projected cost. Obviously, it's mid late July right now. So in a month's time, ADPs can be very different. You know, all it takes is one injury and one player shoots up and one player can shoot down either way. At this point, though, who are some offensive players on the Dallas Cowboys that you're targeting at projected cost right now, dynasty or redraft? Lobo, we'll start with you.
Yeah, you got it. I think I'm going to defer here to the guy we were talking about for about 10 to 15 minutes, and that's going to be Tolbert. Um, per Fantasy Pros right now, he's wide receiver 98 in redraft. So when we're looking at redraft and we want that immediate impact, he's going behind guys like Julio Jones, Traquan Smith, Mechie, who, I mean, John Mechie's a great receiver. He's not going to play. We don't know when he's going to play. And Tolbert is behind guys like that. He's behind guys like Will Fuller, Odell Beckham. Like, you've got to be kidding me.
Oh man,
Like where he falls right now with redraft. So he's an unbelievable value there. I actually just picked him up in Scott Fishbowl, and I was excited to pick him up. And I was
nice.
telling Coach I was able to get him in the 16th round in Scott Fishbowl, and so I'm excited to see what he can do. And I think in that value, I mean, he should be going around that wide receiver 75 mark, around guys like Donovan People-Jones, Josh Palmer, Nico Collins. That's kind of where I see some of his value. So, I mean, the fact that he's close to 100 is just, it's a huge bargain. So in redraft, if that's where he's fallen, absolutely go for him.
And
Yeah, I got
again,
him at wide receiver
go for it.
67. So you're on the
Oh,
money right there, man.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely, brother.
and again, if you're looking at those wide receivers you just mentioned, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Nico Collins, Joshua Palmer. I mean, other than Palmer, with Herbie, of course, you know, the rest of them. I mean, if you're talking about pure situation, it's Tolbert like way ahead. You know what I mean? So if you're
100%.
taking a flyer on a guy, I'm with you. I think you got to go Jalen there.
Yeah.
And now, so that was your pick for redraft, right? How about like a player on the Cowboys for dynasty purposes? Who do you think is the best to target right now at
For
projected cost?
for projected cost, I would have to go with Jake Ferguson. And I
Okay,
know that could probably be, obviously, you know, I'll look at some of the other pieces. I mean, I know we could talk about Zeke and Lamb, and we could talk about everyone there, but I do want to toss Jake Ferguson into the mix around. Dalton Schultz did not come to a contract agreement with the boys. So he's on a 1-year deal right now. We don't know what it looks like next year. I mean, obviously, fourth round draft capital in Ferguson is not ideal for what you want for a potential starter if that's the route he's going to take. But I will say the Cowboys have not really. I mean, other than Jason Witten, have obviously never really had that high draft, and so I think Jake Ferguson is going to have that year to sit behind Schultz. And I think one huge thing about Schultz to keep in mind is, I mean, up until Jarwin got hurt, and I was one of those guys that was Jarwin over Schultz all day last year, all day.
Oh yeah.
And that's, I saw the profile that Jarwin would put up. There was, I mean, that the last game that he had against the Giants when he put up 3 touchdowns. I mean, I was all in on Jarwin. So before he went down, Schultz in a combined 3 seasons with the boys had a combined 7 or 8 catches
Yeah.
combined. I mean, coach, as you know, he was drafted to really be a blocker. He's a great blocker. So I think when you start to look at some of those pieces, that isn't necessarily what's going to drive success. I really think it's Kellen Moore's offensive scheme that gives Schultz that success. So I think
Absolutely.
they're going to give him that 1 year. They're going to see what he does. I'm very high on Schultz this year. I think he'll do great. If he does and he gets the contract, then we can cross this out, Steve, from your cast next year, so that way no one hears this. But um, but if he does not get the extension, then I truly think Ferguson is going to be a guy to watch next year and kind of see how he progresses. So that is my spiel on Dynasty.
But that's the beauty about Dynasty, though. You kind of want to have a lens in the short term, but also in the long term, right? So no
Yeah.
Blake Jarwin. You got the Schultz, who's should have a good year this year,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know about 23 or 2024.
Yep.
Ferguson could just step right in. So I love it. And what's even better about him is he's free. You can get him
He's
in the
absolutely
last
free.
round
Yeah.
of your startup. You can get him after your rookie draft. You just add him as for $0 in fab, or whatever, So the cost benefit there is as high as it could be. It's not hurting you whatsoever. So I love that answer. I
I think
love it.
what's interesting about Jake Ferguson too is, like you mentioned, Dalton Schultz is a good inline tight end, and he's good in the run game. But which is Jason Witten for a long time. Blake Jarwin wasn't
Yep.
afraid to get his hands dirty. If you go back to Jay Novacek, those are guys that were not afraid, to put their hand in the grass and kick some ass, so to speak. But Jake Ferguson's the opposite. Jake Ferguson's more of a move tight end, and he's a guy that
100%.
struggles in pass protection. So you look at
Perfect.
that and you say, based on what Dallas and what they do schematically, if in fact, and this is just bold prediction here, if in fact after the end of this season, right, they have an out with Zeke Elliott's contract. Now you also have Tony Pollard coming at the end of his rookie contract.
Mm-hmm.
I see a scenario where Tony Pollard's the guy they're going to keep, and they're going to try to resign. Zeke is going to be an interesting situation. He's willing to stay at a discount, restructure his contract. We'll see where it goes, but I think that's a situation where Dalton Schultz is going to get franchise tagged again. They're not going to sign another long-term contract. They're going to have a year to see what Jake Ferguson do. Now that, guys, from a coaching perspective, that includes what he does in mini camp, what he does in the film room, what he does on the practice field, whether he gets a lot of reps this year or not. They're looking at it and saying, can we project Jake Ferguson being in a Dalton Schultz type role in 2023? And if we can, then we may franchise tag Schultz for another year, we can get out of him. And then by 2024, we may have something with Jake Ferguson. It's going to be interesting to see how that whole thing plays out. But I think schematically, if they move on from Zeke, right? And if you look at what Kellen Moore came from at Boise State, it doesn't necessarily fit what Dallas has done traditionally with the big bruising tailback. It fits more what Tony Pollard brings as a running back. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting next year to see how these contracts play out. But sorry, I was a little long-winded on that one. We'll get
No, I
back
love
on
it.
track here. But so for me on Dynasty, we're talking about guys that I'm targeting. I'll just run through real quick, just a few guys. But Dak Prescott at QB7, I'll take it all day.
Yeah,
I think he's priced right where he should be. I wouldn't take him in the top 5, but I like him where he's at 7. Dalton Schultz, I know a lot of people are low on, but again, the only knock is he's a security blanket for Dak Prescott. He doesn't give you a lot of yards after the catch. Doesn't give you a lot of deep targets. He's not a corner route guy. He's not a seam route guy. He's a work underneath guy. But defenses are going to roll coverage to CeeDee Lamb. They're going to roll coverage to Gallup when he gets back. So what's open between the numbers and right and over the middle. But I think that Dalton Schultz is a guy that I still value, especially for this season, and I think he's shown enough in this offense. If it's not Dallas next year and he goes somewhere else, he's going to go to a pass-happy offense. That's going to utilize his skill set. So I still think
100%.
Dalton Schultz at tight end 8 is still a good pick, and I have Tolbert down as my third guy. So we're completely in agreement there.
Good.
Perfect. Yeah. So for me, when I'm coming out of a dynasty draft, I think all the Cowboys are appropriately valued, in my opinion.
Except for, I'm gonna give you one guess, guys.
I'm not sure.
We're going redraft, right?
Oh, dynasty.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry. Okay.
even where like Zeke is going,
Well,
I'm
dynasty,
still
I'll say
happy.
Zeke too. Yeah, I'll still say
Okay.
Zeke on dynasty. Yeah.
I'm still happy to draft him as an RB2. I mean, you can just get him in the RB20s, which I just think is silly. Even either way, but for redraft purposes, CD Lamb and Dalton Schultz are players that I will be very upset if I leave my draft without. Because you know CD Lamb just might not make it out of the second round in some of these leagues. I mean,
Yeah.
and in like 1-1-1 QB leagues. Like he's awesome. I am so excited for him this year. I
Yeah.
just think the opportunity is through the roof, and he's just a phenomenal player. So Schultz as like the mid-tier tight end, it's hard for me to pounce on some of the upper echelon tight ends in typical redraft leagues. I mainly aim to get those guys like through trading, like in the middle of the season, if it makes sense to. So Schultz for me is in that sweet spot. And then for Dynasty, I think they're all appropriately valued, and we already touched on a lot of those guys. So really like that. So I'm going to transition to any players you guys are going to be fading at projected cost. Like my answer with the Dynasty, for me, it's none. I'm very interested in all of them. Now for redraft, the only one that I would really be fading at their cost is Tony Pollard. It seems like he's getting drafted to be played as a flex. And obviously, he finished as an RB2 last year. But for me, and I know he's a very popular like hero RB target or even like a zero RB target. So I understand that. But I just can't do it in the seventh or the eighth round or wherever he's going. That's just something I just will not be. I don't foresee my. I don't want to say never, but I don't foresee myself coming away with him in a lot of drafts. Definitely a guy to acquire by trade. Sooner the better. A team's struggling and they're not that the Pollard thing isn't working out. So it's very situation specific. And I always tell myself like these scenarios where I think I can make this sort of thing happen, and it never works out. But I like to pretend. But either way, he's the only one I would really be fading at the projected cost for this year. So how about you guys? Is there anyone you're kind of like trying to shy away from?
Go ahead, Coach.
So I was just gonna say, so I'll piggyback because I'm kind of like you, Steve, in the sense for dynasty. What do we look for in dynasty, right? You're looking for offenses that are high powered,
Yep.
at the skill position, right? If you're running back and you're not getting elite volume, are you involved in the passing game? There's certain things that we're looking for, right?
Yep.
So I don't really have. I mean, I'm looking for guys from Dallas. I'm looking for guys from Buffalo. I'm looking for guys from Tampa Bay. I'm looking for guys from. Give me the guys that are going to see the volume in a high-powered offense. Are going to get scoring opportunities. But I want to just touch on the Zeke Elliott real quick because I know
Oh,
that's a
perfect.
big topic of conversation. And I was the biggest. If you go back and look at my Twitter a year ago, I was constantly having to defend Zeke Elliott, right? Because in 2020, you had all the injuries to the offensive line. You had Dak out after week 5, he suffered the compound fracture, and you had Cooper Rush and sidearm Willie, Ben DiNucci, and playing. So everybody was low in the box. So I was defending Zeke. Now all of a sudden you look at, and I get the PCL injury last year, but if you're making a conscious choice as a team and an organization and as a player to play through that, you have to be responsible for the numbers that you produce. I think it's that simple. We're trying to win a Super Bowl, right? So I look at Zeke Elliott and I say, hey, if you're going to take him at RB20, then you're chasing volume versus efficiency. You're saying I have to get the Zeke that's going to get 270 plus touches. He's going to get all the goal line carries because he's got to give me that 10 to 12 to 13 touchdowns to make that pick make sense. If the trend continues and we're going on 4 years in a row of Zeke seeing less volume and Tony Pollard seeing more volume, I had a draft where I took him at RB31. I'll take that value all day. That's insane. But if you're going to take him at RB 17, 18, 19, then I think you have to really look at what Dallas is trying to do schematically and where Zeke Elliott fits into that at the 27-year, at the apex age that he is at. And I did a post last week, and I was trying to pull it up, but I can't find it because I post way too often. I don't know where it's at. I'm not quick at searching these things. But Zeke Elliott, from his years at Ohio State and in the NFL, has got an insane number of touches. And this is not a back. This is a scat back. This is a back that looks to punish you when you try to tackle him. So I just feel like we're at that point where if it's not now, when are we off on Zeke? If I can get him in the back end and I can get him at 25, 26, 27, 31, yeah, I'm okay taking him. But, right, if I'm hero running back, I'm out. If I'm going zero running back, you're never going to get him anyway. If I'm going robust running back, sure, I could take him as my RB3. But I'm not going to reach for Zeke, and I'm not going to take him at where his ADP is currently at, even though it's been dropping based off the volume, what they're trying to do, I think, schematically, and where I think this offense is going to go into the future. And then you have the contract. So I just want to touch on that. So if there's a fade for dynasty or a redraft, I'm just not taking Zeke unless it's there because his efficiency numbers, and I won't read them all off to you, but they are absolutely garbage for 2 consecutive seasons. He's outside the top 30 in every efficiency metric, and some cases in the bottom, in about 44, 45. So when you look at the whole package, you just go, man, I can't continue to trust that that's going to be there. So at some point you got to be out on him. And for me, that's now. And I hate to say it because I love the guy. I hope he goes for 2,000 yards this year. But I just don't see it, man. I don't see the volume being there.
I think as a Cowboy fan, and for all Cowboy fans out there, we see it, Coach. You know, I mean, I think that Zeke that you saw, and I think you tweeted this as well, is like the Zeke that caught the ball against the Steelers in like overtime and took it 70 yards to the house. Like that Zeke.
I did tweet on that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think like that we won't see that Zeke, and I think you're right. It's been 2 years in a row where we've seen his efficiency just drop. My only call out there is even if he doesn't rush for his 1,000, even if he doesn't get that consistent 250, 260 carries, the efficiency has been dropping, and that's no doubt. Where he has been consistent
is in the red zone.
In the red zone and in the passing game.
That's the argument. Yeah.
Extremely consistent in the passing game. And I tweeted this just 2 days ago where I said since 2018, there's only been 2 backs who averaged 65 targets over the last 4 years. And that's Alvin Kamara and Ezekiel Elliott. So to your point, I don't see that changing this year as far as targets go. I think he still gets that target. I think we do see Tony Pollard get a lot of more carries because we saw the efficiency there. And Zeke just, he doesn't have that burst that we need. If it's a 2nd and 10, 2nd and 11, Tony Pollard is getting the ball over Zeke to get that run, to get us those 6-7 yards, because we see that burst that we used to see from Zeke. And Zeke, my favorite thing about him, watching him run when he first started with us, was if he was getting tackled, if he was falling forward.
Every time.
And you knew that a 2-yard carry was turning into a 5-yard carry because he was slamming it down their throats. Now he just gets tackled and it just kind of just like stops there. And that's kind of what we see from Tony Pollard, though, because he is that scat back and he's just that shifty back where it's like he gets touched and then he's falling, but he falls forward and he falls for another 3-4 yards. So, I would agree with that. But I'm hoping what has made Zeke stay fantasy relevant the last 2 years has been the passing game and the involvement there. So I'm hoping to see that just one more year from him, because we will need that if we want to win a Super Bowl. So
it's definitely the argument is if he's still
100%.
relevant in the passing game and he gets the goal line carries, there's value for Zeke. See, and I see things. I just see it a little bit differently, and I think I hope you're right. And I'm going to continue to say that because I want Zeke to play really well this year. Although it puts us in a real conundrum in the next offseason. But I just, man, what you're hearing through camp is they're using Pollard more in the slot. They're using more what I call in coaching is a split formation, which is 2 running backs in the backfield. both on either side of the quarterback, and one of them is going to motion out into the slot. Now that can be Zeke, that can be Pollard. You're looking for what defense does in terms of adjustments and what we're going to do, reading the apex players in the box. But that's where I disagree a little bit. I think Pollard is going to get 150, 155 touches in the rushing game, which is going to be another
Okay.
little bit of an increase. And I think you're going to see him, if it's outside the 5, be more involved in red zone carries, right? And I think you're going to see him a little bit more involved in the passing game. I think there's going to be a little bit taken away, because the reality is, what do I want after the catch? I want the yak. I want a guy that's got more explosion. I don't need a
Yep.
possession receiver on 3rd and 2 that's going to catch the ball and give me a first down and move the chains. I want a
Right.
little bit more explosion. So I just feel like, and look, again, I hope you're right, but I see Pollard taking on a little bit more of the
Yeah.
passing role too.
I mean,
Which
don't
will
get me
be,
wrong. I hope so. I have Pollard in a lot of dynasty leagues, so I'm okay with
yeah, me
that.
too.
But
Maybe that's why I'm saying that, because I'm so heavy invested into Pollard and not Zeke. Maybe that's why I'm a little, you know.
Yeah, no, I think Tony Pollard is a fantastic player. Just when it comes to his redraft costs, I just like I love the player, hate the ADP there, and
Yeah.
I remain optimistic about Ezekiel Elliott. Just being a Penn State fan and an Eagles fan, all I've known for the last 8 years is just Ezekiel Elliott breaking my
Killing you.
heart. You know,
Yeah.
just killing us. Now I am hoping for a big year because I got him as my RB2 in Scott Fishbowl in the 5th round as the 19th running back off the board in my division. So, yeah, I found myself on the bad side of a running back run there in the 5th round, and
you know
was
what?
very happy to get Zeke
It makes
where
more
I
sense in
did.
Scott Fishbowl though too, I think, Steve, because you get the first downs.
Yeah.
And
That's
that's
right.
something that
Yeah,
Zeke is
absolutely.
used in short yardage
Yep.
situations. So I think the bonus points taken from an RB 25, I'm okay with 19, 20, 21 in Scott Fishbowl, because you get the first downs, and if he's still
Yeah.
involved in the passing game, the goal line,
100%.
I think that's a solid pick. A
Yep.
little bit different than what we're talking about in standard or PPR scoring. But hey, and real quick, just I want to touch on Pollard too. Is I think people get confused when they see a debate. Jacob Sanderson, it was him and I would get in debate after debate last year about Zeke versus Pollard, and I was still team Zeke until about week 8, and I finally flipped. But um, I think people understand too, is I'm not saying Tony Pollard is an RB1. I'm not saying if Zeke misses significant time in a game here and there, when Pollard's had to fill in as RB1 and Zeke misses a game, he plays really well. But no, he's not the guy in their type of scheme, right? That's going to run between the tackles and give you 25 carries a game like Zeke does. He can do it in spurts, but that's not who Tony Pollard is. So I want nothing to do with him if he's getting 250 carries, right? Because he's going to get beat up. He's going to miss some games. He's going to have, it's just, that's not his style. He's a phenomenal
Mm,
complement
yeah.
in that offense, which is why they're both so important. But he's a guy that technically you want in a Kansas City type offense. You
Yeah.
want in a Tampa Bay type offense. You want in a offenses that try to spread you out. Not Tampa Bay. I'm sorry, I meant the Chargers. And those are the type of offense that Tony Pollard would thrive in, is an Austin Eckler type role, but not with what Cowboys do right now. He's just great as a complimentary back. So I just want to make sure
Yeah.
everybody understands that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point you bring up because I just think back to that game against the 49ers. I think it was 2 seasons ago. Zeke was inactive and it was the playoffs, and Pollard put up this 20 plus fantasy
Yeah,
point performance and looked phenomenal.
Mhm.
But that was just a one game sample size. So if you're playing DFS and you cashed in on that, or if you happen to start him in your playoffs, that's awesome. But it's like you never saw Darren Sproles. Like, I'm not comparing Sproles to Pollard necessarily, but you never saw him function as a workhorse running back. And it's just not what
yeah,
that's not what he's about. But he was very good for many years in the role that he had. And I think to your point, I don't think he will ever be the Ezekiel Elliott type of he won't get
no,
used in that way. We can love him as a player, we can love him as a talent. It's just not going to be to his long-term benefit to be utilized in that way. But yeah, I think that's an excellent point that you bring up there. But it is a very interesting one because people love their Tony Pollard, and
yeah.
I can't blame him for it. I just can't draft him and redraft where he's going, at least right now. Yeah, again, I never want to say never, but yeah.
I
The
think there's
question,
very few running backs that have RB1 upside if the RB1 goes down, right? Like, I think
Right.
too many people get kind of handcuffs is such a great topic too, but there's too many people that get caught up in, handcuffing running backs. Well, not everybody that's an RB2 that works schematically within what they do as a complementary back becomes an RB1,
Right.
right? Naheem Hines, if JT goes down, he's still great in the passing game. He's not getting goal line carries. He's not getting the 3rd and 2 carries. They're going to
Mhm.
find somebody else on that roster that's going to do the dirty work for him. That's not his skill set.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
Yep.
there's other running backs you can name, like a Ronald Jones, right? He struggles in the passing game. There's just things that other running backs don't bring, but there's very few true handcuffs that if that first running back goes down are going to give you RB1 upside. And that's your Alexander Madison, that's your Darrell Henderson, that's your Tony Pollard, the Kareem Hunt, which again, you could say 1A, 1B. But those are the guys I think when we talk about handcuffs. But, not to get off topic, but I'm just not a big handcuffing your own guys. I'm more about handcuffing everybody else's guys, which is a lot of how I drafted in the Scott Fishbowl. It's the most injured position in football. So
And
having a lot
Herbert
of
in Chicago,
RB2s.
I have to add that
Oh,
one in.
love Herbert.
I love
Love
Herbert
Herbert.
as a
I
Yeah,
handcuff.
love
I think
Herbert.
he's a top
that's a great
tier,
call.
elite
100%.
handcuff to grab in every redraft league. He's another
Yep.
guy, but either way, I want to keep it to the
Good
I
call.
want to keep
I
it to
love
the
it.
Cowboys. I already said
I,
enough about him in my Bears show,
I love Khalil.
but yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, I think we did it. I think we gave the audience, which of course, pretty much at this point is just my mom, a very good idea of what to expect from the Dallas Cowboys from a real life perspective, but also from a fantasy perspective. So once again, I thank you both for coming on. Please tell the people who are listening where they can find you and what you're working on. And again, thank you for coming on. So we'll start with you, Lobo.
Absolutely. Everyone can find me at Lobos FF Den, where I just tweet a bunch of nonsense, a lot of football nonsense, but nonetheless, just I like to have fun on there. I like to talk football. There's a lot of good pieces there. Writer for FF Face Off and for Dynasty Pros, which is where I met Steve. Had the pleasure of meeting him there, and it's been absolutely, man. It's been great since. And I do have one last call out. So for those listening, and obviously everyone here, because it is a Cowboys themed podcast for this week. I wanted to kind of throw some Cowboys gear out there. So if you are listening to this, please give Steve a follow, give Coach a follow, give myself a follow, and I'll be raffling and I guess raffling off this NFL jersey. It's actually a Zeke jersey. We talked about Zeke so much, so I don't know. It was
There you go.
it was absolutely a Zeke. It's a white and silver Ezekiel Elliott jersey. So just follow all three of us, retweet the podcast. Let's get Steve some listens. This is a phenomenal show. Steve's an awesome guy. So let's get those follows up and let's get that going. And then we will announce a winner. I will announce a winner at some point next week. So I'm excited for it. And then anything coming up right now is just as if you were following me last year, I had my alphas of the week, which was my kind of stardom that I do every week. I'm working very closely to get that design up and running again. I will have that again this year. We will have a small sample in the next coming weeks. So be on the lookout for that. And Steve, it was awesome, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep.
Man, I don't even know how to follow that one up, man. So I'm just going to say this. You guys can get a podcast worn Dallas Cowboys t-shirt signed by Coach Bruce. You're welcome.
Perfect.
Worth absolutely nothing. Matter of fact, you'll probably give me some change back. I get it. And you know what I could do? I could throw in a bottle of Eagle Rare, for you bourbon enthusiasts. Got plenty of them. Maybe I'll throw one of those in with you. There you go. You can find me on Twitter at Coach Bruce 122 and Instagram at Coach Bruce 122. And I am doing some content over at Yards Per. Big shout out to those guys. Absolutely love the team over there. And I've got a project, which is Project 32, which I am rolling out one team a day for 32 days that will start August 2nd. These are complete breakdowns from every position group, so including the offensive line. We'll talk quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, fantasy expectations, where I see them going, what they do schematically from an offensive standpoint to help you understand how to set your lineups every week, and of course, how to draft your best players each week. So that's something I'm super excited about. For 32 consecutive days, we'll also be honoring a charity at the end of each team page for you guys to donate and raise awareness for those charities. And then I do some rankings over at Fantasy Pros, which they've committed to me, and I've yet to completely fill out the rankings yet, but I promise you I'll get to it. especially as we get in season, especially week 4 of the preseason. I'll certainly have all those rankings updated. But hey, just to echo, I mean, Steve, you've been absolutely phenomenal. I know you and I have talked a lot on Twitter. It's nice to finally put a face with a logo. And that's the funnest part about the expo too, is you run into a bunch of people, and if you didn't have the lanyards on, you'd have no idea who you're talking to, and it might be somebody that you've talked to 50 times on Twitter. So always good to catch up with you, Ralph, and love what you're doing over there at Lobo's Den, man. So we'll
Thanks,
look
brother.
forward to catching up with you guys again soon, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great. It's great talking to you guys because we all are league mates in one way or another. I'm in a league with Bruce.
Yeah.
I'm in a couple of leagues with Lobo. So it's just really fun to interact on Twitter, interact in the actual game that we're talking about, and you really see the real player come out, which is phenomenal. You guys are as sharp as they come, so it's just great competition all around, and friendly, of course, but we all are trying to win at the end of the day. But
100%.
thank you both so much for coming on. Best of luck to your fantasy teams and best of luck to your Cowboys. And please, everyone listening, check out all of their content and give them a follow. Follow myself, please, and subscribe to the show. That'd be wonderful. Look out for Project 32 and look out for the alphas of the week. And there you have it. That is the Dallas Cowboys. Thank you guys again for coming on. Have a good one.